4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City. A fusion of politics, commentary, entertainment, and sports. Steve and his team bring you the latest news and opinion now. Here is Steve Malzberg.
We need to put a red line with Iran. You know, you can help stabilize.
How do you do that?
Well, you just sit down and talk with them. If Baghdad falls and the central government collapses in Iraq, the Iranians are the biggest winner. We're the biggest loser. ISIS, as Nick says, operates with impunity from Syria to Baghdad. They will hit us again. They will march on Jordan. Three things very quickly. Put American air power into the game. These guys are not 10 feet tall. Stop the advance on Baghdad. Get people on the ground that the Iraqis trust. Maliki must go. Get a new government in place, right? And hit Syria. If you don't deal with Syria in a coordinated fashion, maybe with Turkey, regional Sunni Arab states, you'll have this happen all over again in Iraq.
All right, it just seems like a very tall order for the president who had a chance to strike in Syria, of course, many, many months ago, and chose not to order that without the consent of Congress, which it didn't get to. In response, of course, at that time, the claims were to the gassing of civilians, including children. So John Kerry today, folks, saying that airstrikes are under consideration. We heard from the White House today that this evening the president will meet with his military team, and we will see where this goes. We're going to be joined by Andy Card in just a second. I want to welcome all of you watching on DirecTV and Dish Network. It's wonderful to be here on Newsmax Television on our first day on those two wonderful platforms, and I hope you'll tell your friends, and I hope you'll make it a habit. And of course, if you can't watch the show, TiVo it and watch it when you can. Meanwhile, before we get to Andy Card, let's watch this.
I think you have to consider what's happened around the world during the years that she was Secretary of State, and you have to say it's been a monumental bust. And then her most recent comments as she was rolling out the book, she was asked whether the Bergdahl trade was one that presented a threat to the United States. And she came back with a clueless answer. She was clueless. She said, look, Bergdahl, or excuse me, these commandos don't represent a threat to the United States. Well, of course they do. And then she went on to say they only represent a threat to Afghanistan and Pakistan. Are you kidding? I mean, we're in Afghanistan.
All right, folks, there you go. That's Mitt Romney yesterday on Meet the Press talking about Hillary Clinton and her role in all of this. And joining us now, as promised, is Andy Card, Andrew Card, of course, former Chief of Staff for President George W. Bush and Acting Dean of the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M University. Hello, sir.
Hello, it's great to be with you, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Good to talk to you again. Thank you very much. All right, so before we get to Hillary and any role she might have had, you know, I sat here with David Ignatius of the Washington Post last week, and he said, yeah, we shouldn't have gone into Iraq in the first place. And he and I debated that briefly. But he did admit, even you know, and he's no conservative, but he did admit that the Iraq that Barack Obama was handed over should not look like the Iraq we are seeing today in 2014.
I absolutely agree with you. First of all, President Bush indicated that if we didn't do things right in Iraq in terms of maintaining some order, that things were going to deteriorate basically to what's happening today. And it is a more dangerous Iraq. It's more dangerous for America today than it was when President Bush left office. And it's a direct result of the policies that President Obama put in place. He did not have a status of forces agreement signed that allowed us to have a presence there where we would have been a restraining conscience, if you will, on the kinds of things that are happening in Iraq today. We would have had better intelligence. We would have offered, I would say, greater security, at least security for the sitting government in Baghdad. And quite frankly, we would have been a threat to the bad guys doing bad things. And right now, there's no threat to the bad guys, and they are doing bad things. And it's likely to get much worse before it gets better because this cauldron is boiling over. And you're finding that the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, which is the Islamic State in Iraq and in Syria and Iraq, is just outrageous. They want to have a caliphate. They want to have a place where they can mount attacks against interests, like the United States and what we want to do. It's not just about what's happening in Iraq. They want a place where they can mount a campaign against kind of the rest of the world. And Maliki has screwed things up. The administration has created a climate where there's no consequence for this kind of activity. And right now, President Obama is kind of absent from the debate.
Well, you know, Andy, he holds a press conference, and maybe not a press. Well, it turned into a mini press conference. He went to the microphones, made some remarks. That was on Friday. This was after several days of this, and if we have any intelligence, we would have known about this even prior to that. On Friday, he announces he's going to be meeting over the next few days with his military advisors to decide what to do. Here we are Monday. Another town has fallen. And no action. A, should he have gone to the microphone to say, I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but we'll get back to you? And B, how could he not have a decision by now?
Well, he actually went to the microphone and he said all options are on the table, and the first thing he did was take off an option.
Right, troops, yeah.
Okay, so, which I'm not sure is a bad thing to do, but there's a little bit of an oxymoron there. All things are on the table. Well, no, they aren't. He doesn't lead with any fear, so there's no. The Islamists do not fear President Obama right now. They just his red lines get passed and there's no consequence. His don't do that, and they do it. There's no consequence. So I don't think there's any fear that he motivates around the world. He certainly hasn't earned a lot of respect, and he's lost the admiration that people had for him, and that was a knee-jerk admiration. So I think that he is struggling to be a leader for the world, and as a result, America's stature around the world has greatly diminished. So I worry about it. Yeah. And I think Abu Bakr, who leads this ISIS group, is a really, really, really bad guy. And he wants to create a caliphate, and he wants to create a place where he can mount attacks against our interests, including attacks on U.S. soil here, half a world away. You look at Libya, who we fought alongside and supported. You look at Syria, who we're fighting alongside and supporting when we do support anyone there. They're al-Qaeda, they're terrorists. You look at throwing over our ally in Egypt, Mubarak, and supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, being very vehemently opposed to their ouster, even though he ran a very repressive regime while he was in there, Morsi. And now this, and now we're talking about maybe fighting with Iran. I mean, my God, Andrew, how different a world is this since you guys left office? It's such a different world, and not only that, President Bush told us that this is what the world would look like if we didn't keep our eye on the real objectives and make sure that we had a presence and a conscience in that part of the world. The Saudis don't trust us anymore. The Iranians are playing us. Maliki is looking more to Iran for help than to the United States.
The Israelis?
The Israelis can't count on us, so they kind of have to do their own thing, and they're going to be paying attention with great skepticism.
But is this by design, Andy? Do you think this is by
more weeds than it did flowers?
You think this is by design? Because it seems there's a thread of consistency in everything that's occurred.
Well, I don't think it's by design. I don't think, they're an administration of hope, not design. And so I think they're stumbling, and while they stumble, others march. And the march has been against us, not with us.
What about Iran as an ally? Senator Lindsey Graham reportedly made remarks favoring an alliance of sorts with Iran, and others have come out vehemently opposed to that.
That part of the world, they are used to situations where the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And right now, the Iranian enemy is the ISIS, the group that is fighting Maliki. Maliki is against the ISIS, and the United States is against the ISIS. So I guess you could say the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and therefore the Iranians are friends. I just don't trust them. Now, we're also supposed to be sitting down and trying to negotiate with the Iranians to have them give up their ambitions to have any nuclear weapon. And that's happening coterminous with this. I just hope the U.S. doesn't cut a deal with the Iranians saying, okay, we'll stand with you as you do something in Iraq, provided you do something else with us. I just don't know what the game plan's going to be. I don't know what John Kerry has in mind as he instructs the negotiators. I don't know what President Obama has in mind as he tries to command respect and introduce a little fear so that people know that they should listen to us, and if they don't, there are consequences.
Andy, one final question. Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State for all those years in the first term, does she bear, reportedly, she didn't want us to remain in Iraq at all. She didn't want a status agreement. She fought against that, the reports are indicating today. Does she skate free on all this stuff?
I hope not. I mean, clearly it was a huge blow to American security not to have a status of forces agreement in Iraq. And think of all of the young men and women that made phenomenal sacrifices because the president sent their men to protect us and to give a better climate for national security, and that was given away with no status of forces agreement. And now we're finding that Maliki really doesn't even look to us to help solve his problems. He's looking more to Iran. So I think that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton bears some of the burden for what is happening today by not having these status of forces agreement where we would have been a conscience, we would have had boots on the ground that would have been, I'm going to say, a bit of stability in the region, and we would have had better intelligence, and we would have been able to hold Maliki's feet to the fire to do things right, not to have a sectarian government.
Andy, thank you so much, sir. Pleasure to speak to you. Appreciate it.
Okay, Steve, good to be with you.
Thank you. Andy Card, ladies and gentlemen. The panel's next.